pleasure today to introduce our CEO and founder, Pankaj Agarwal, who will be introducing our speakers and telling you a little bit about Optimus information. Pankaj?
You guys must have figured it out. He comes, by the way, from the theater industry. No, seriously, yes. If you need some, in every theater in Vancouver, he knows which are the best seats.
It's true.
So that makes it easy for us. So good morning, everyone. I think, yeah, we are seeing some pretty good turnout, and I hope you guys enjoyed some live music. So yeah, this is more like a tradition we have made, and at least I enjoy it. So that's one of the perks of being the boss. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little jet lagged. I just came back from India. So, no, okay, I think I'm okay. Yeah, so I'll just take 3 or 4 minutes. And many of you, it looks like more than 50% have been here before. So honestly, these are the same slides, not much has changed. So just bear with me. So what we are trying to do in Optimus in very simple terms is, as companies are digitally transforming, we really help them in that process. So that's really a very simple sales pitch and value add from our side. And what really we believe is we work in a very collaborative way so that we are their partners in the overall journey. So what we do is really we serve Canadian enterprises and independent software vendors. We are a Vancouver-based company, and we have a team here as well as a wholly owned subsidiary in New Delhi, India. And many of you must have noticed, I was in India last week. Mr. Trump was also in India last week. So that was, yeah, it's pretty interesting, I think, what they did. And as you know, India right now, sorry, I'm going off the script, but right now India is also run by a right-wing party like UK and US, and they spent almost $25–30 million in his welcome, which is really for a country like India, a lot of taxpayers' money. Anyway, so yeah, and yeah. So, but it was interesting. I was in Delhi, so what was happening there? It's yeah, and so yeah, the left part of the slide is important. What we believe is really being an integrated part of customers' teams, that one process, one team, and one success criteria for the work. So we are one of Canada's fastest growing companies. What we say is we are a local touch and global delivery model. As you know, Vancouver market is it's very hard to hire, so we really try to take advantage of our local resources as well as our delivery team in India. And what we are really proud of is we have done more than 1 million hours of work, which is billable work for the customers. We have paid for that type of work for various customers over the last 10 years. And out of that, there are many customers for whom we have done more than 50,000 hours of work for an individual client. So there are many such customers, and we'll be more than happy to share some of those stories. Yeah, these are some of our customers. As you will see, we have a very strong presence in British Columbia, and I'm sure you will recognize many names, and some of those companies are in the room. In terms of services, what we are, yeah, we are still fixing this slide. Actually, we need to do a little better on this one, but basically we start from architecture and design services all the way to QA and test, and including all the application development, data analytics, and more DevOps, particularly as customers are moving to the cloud. And we are 100% focused on Microsoft Azure. That's our chosen platform, and yeah, I think it has been a great partnership, and many of Microsoft team members are here in crowd. So feel free to report on them. So yeah, we are seeing some pretty good results. And we started that journey almost, I'll say 24 months ago, when we said we'll be 100% on Azure, and that has really paid very well. I think we are one of very few Microsoft partners in Canada with 7 gold competencies, and so that really shows that And actually one thing I forgot. So one of the core value of Optimus is really growth mindset. We are all about learning, so we invest a lot in learning. And when we say learning, we also want to demonstrate that we have learned. So this is a good way to show our demonstrated capabilities. So with these 7 gold competencies and almost 100 now certified professionals, we are a pretty good spot. This is another slide which I like is we really are very active in community, and we'll be very happy to talk to anyone if there's any particular charity any one of you have in mind. We'll be happy to support as long as it's not a political or religious charity. And so these are some organizations we support here as well as some in India. And most of them are really around education, and recently we started doing a little bit around youth, and but mostly around education. And these are some of the companies in the room. So idea of showing this slide is feel free to interact with each other and learn from each other. Okay, so what we are doing today is, and this format has worked for us in the past, so we thought why not just repeat the same format. So we are fortunate to have Jim with us, Jim Bowyer, and he said he would like to give his own intro. So, but he has been with Microsoft for more than 10 years, and that's when, sorry, I'm taking a little bit of your script, but that's when I believe Microsoft launched Azure. So he has been there since day one, and I have heard a lot of good things about Jim from my friends at Microsoft, so I'm sure there'll be some interesting learning there. And then Finning is one of the largest, I think, Azure consumers in Canada, and we are fortunate to have Pablo with us, who has been leading that effort. And then last but not the least, my good friend Mukund, who is CTO of Build Direct, but also he has been with Amazon and Microsoft before, so he'll be leading the panel discussion, and then we are open for Q&A. Thank you. Enjoy.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and happy Thursday. Quick poll of hands. Who in this room is running a part of their business on a hyperscale cloud, whether they're yellow, blue, or any other color? Just hold those hands up. Keep those hands up if you think your journey is complete and you're done and you're okay. All right. I was hoping at least one person I could talk to you and find out how this works. My name is Jim Bowyer. Pankaj very kindly sort of gave an introduction there and said, hey, introduce yourself, Jim, and we discussed back and forth. Pankaj asked me to come and talk with you all this morning around do's and don'ts in Azure. And I reflected on that. I actually polled my organization. I get to serve and lead about 80 plus, 85 individuals, 75 of which are cloud solution architects in what we call our Azure Customer Success team. It's all across Canada. I spend most of my life in an Eastern time zone, although my home is in Calgary. And those individuals get to help, some of them are in a room with us today, they get to work with our customers to accelerate their mean time to value, switching on our services. I mean, we're in a different world now. We'll talk about that in a minute when I touch on procurement. I myself originally joined Microsoft back in 2001, left about 2011 and came back in 2012 after a year away. It's kind of my MBA year. I joke about it. I ran a farm out east, but that's a different story. We won't talk about that right now. But I came back in 2012 and I was hired as one of only 2, I guess you call them sales engineers, although we didn't have a sales component to our compensation plan for Azure. And I'd been playing around with Azure in 2010. I'd done a little bit of work with it, but I think we were just kicking the tires, to be honest. And a lot of our Canadian customers were reticent to sort of jump into that, even though our strategy folks in Redmond were saying, hey, this is big, this is happening, this is where we're going. And always impressive when you get to work with an organization or individuals who think about strategy and paint a picture 10, 20 years out, because a lot of what they were describing then, maybe the paths were different to get here, but most of that has happened. 10 years later, we now have an organization with 80-odd dedicated cloud solution architects and a field force in Microsoft Canada that's very heavily focused on helping customers adopt and be successful with our cloud. And I polled my organization and said, hey, come on folks, tell me the stuff, tell me the stories. I'm going to share some stories with you this morning, and I'll protect the names of the innocent or remove some of them. But I have a catalog of my own stories too. What was interesting about what I got back, I filtered through all that, was really, it boiled down to 5 themes. And so I'm going to talk this morning around those 5 themes and share them with you all. And I think the really cool thing is, actually, you could take those themes and they'd be equally relevant if you were turning stuff on with our friends in yellow, or our friends are red and blue, or whatever, you know, color you choose, whatever kind of cloud flavor you have. Actually, the themes I've got to share with you this morning are pretty, you know, relevant for both. These are the things that we see, mainly enterprise, sometimes small and medium customers do, that hurt themselves and hurt their journey into a public cloud. So let's just jump in and keep going. I think it's good, and I won't dwell too long on these early slides, but I want us to ask, why do people do this? I mean, why it works? It's in a data center. I've been in business for 20 years, 30 years. Why would I do this? And a lot of this comes around not so much necessarily from IT folks and technology folks, but our business friends, the leaders of business, have got itches that they want to scratch. And I'm not going to drain this slide, but if you look at point 4, you know, 2/3, this is a poll that was done late 2018, and in that instance, these leaders of companies, 2/3 of them are saying, hey, if we don't digitally transform ourselves in 4 years, we're going to be the next blockbuster, essentially. And that's 2018, so we're now, you know, late 2018, so we're more than a quarter of the way through that. So there's probably some people that are even more stressed, and they're putting a lot of pressure. And we see this across all sizes of business, where business leaders are pushing their technology folks to move faster, to get going, to think about the things that define what I do as an organization or as a business that's different from the competitors in my market, and to get away from, for most of us, from running these things called data centers, which is cute, interesting, but actually for a lot of us, it doesn't define us and differentiates us from the people next door that we compete and work with. Whether you are a government sector folk that's trying to attract citizens and businesses, or whether you're a commercial entity that's trying to sell and work with a business. So these are the 5 themes that I boiled down and distilled from, you know, pages of feedback that I had, and reflections and stories that I got working with customers over the, you know, a lot in depth since 2012 onwards, and some early 2010 stories, but a lot of those stories probably go and span the last 7 years, and we still see people repeating and making some of these mistakes in the way they approach things. So without further ado, I'll jump in. We do have a Q&A session after Pablo speaks, so that's a great time to, if you see something in these slides, and I'm not going to drain every single bullet in these slides, and these are handouts. If you see something you want to ask or you want to dig into, let's do that in the Q&A. Okay. I don't know, I'm looking around the room wondering how many of us, I know 1999 was a little foggy for me, or maybe 99 was good, 2000 was really, can't remember anything, January the 1st, but, you know, I think as an age group, a lot of us senior leaders in companies and IT will remember the 2000s, and this gentleman here is clearly celebrating the big 2000 milestone. I think the key thing to land here is that we forget that, like everything else that our businesses and organizations use, at some point you're going to procure cloud. And the way you do that is important. And a lot of folks, we see this repeatedly, and it's actually tragically, the bigger the customer, the more likely they're going to fall into this faux pas. We see organizations that procure software, cloud services, like the way they bought enterprise software in the 2000s. And it's highly poisonous for a bunch of reasons. And I'm going to illustrate that with just one of many stories I have. Again, I will protect the names of the innocent, but this is a large, actually Western Canadian resource industry customer going through some tribulating times. They recently split their company. And I got wind of this after a long process of RFPs, which were, you know, arguably not very helpful to their journey through it to adopt cloud. But long story short, they decided they were going to go and switch on Azure and move large chunks of their assets into Azure. And the conversation that got relayed to me was between the account executive and the head of procurement at this company. And it went something like, hey, we're thinking of using $200,000 of Azure next year. What can you guys do for me? And a little bit of back and forth, and the account executive said, well, you're at the discount level, yada, yada, yada. I said, well, what if we give you $400,000? And this goes on and on and on. And the net result of this is that particular customer walks away with the equivalent of a phone card for $1 million that expires in 12 months. And for many of us, we were just stunned. And I was just saying, why did you do that? You're insane. You know, I mean, we have customers now that consume far more than that annually, but the mechanics of the journey were going to be bigger than that organization could undertake. And what was really frustrating is they were playing this sort of 2005, hey, you're the vendor, we're not going to talk to you, we're going to make these decisions by ourselves, we're going to isolate ourselves from you, we don't want your assistance, and hey, haggle hard, and I throw a few $100,000 more on the table, will you give me a bigger discount? And that just doesn't make any sense in today's era. Most, you know, all those cloud vendors that you see out there, public cloud vendors, they're selling a service at point that you pay by the minute, by the second. You don't like it, you switch it off. So if you think about your traditional $10 million enterprise software project, you're not spending $10 million up front. You're spending $100K up front and moving forward in little steps. And you absolutely do not want to put down the $10 million up front because you want that freedom and flexibility to move and do what you want. And we'll talk about things, other perceptions in a second that drive people to make some of these silly decisions. But here's some do's and don'ts, and you're going to get these slides shared with you. But essentially, don't buy more than you're going to use. I mean, it's a good idea to negotiate with your vendor, whoever you work with, and take what you're going to use and get a good discount. But think about this as a different paradigm from the way that you used to procure and purchase software. Some of you may be working for crown corporations or public sector customers. I get that you have to run RFPs, but I would encourage you to try and think a little bit more imaginatively about what you want to get out of those RFPs. Again, Microsoft, like our competitors, will actually come and help you, will come and spend time, will come on site, will help you switch on a version of what you want and get it run the way you want. That's probably far more valuable than us answering 1,000 questions of which no one's going to read, and maybe 10% of them are relevant to what you really want to do. Then the other thing is your cloud brings with it a bunch of capabilities which, again, you'd be churlish to avoid. Auto-scale, turning things on and off. There's a ton of features that companies like us have bought to our services to enable you to save money. Use those, leverage those, you'll have a far happier journey, less bumps in the road, and you're not going to end up throwing away money that you don't use. In that particular case, I'll circle that story back, this is 3 years ago. Back then, Microsoft compensated its sellers, sharing some of our dirty laundries, we still compensated sellers on the dollars they brought home. We stopped that about 2.5 years ago. And nowadays, you won't find a seller anywhere in Microsoft around the world who gets compensated on you signing a check for Azure. What they're interested in is, what did you use? And what we're interested in, and that keeps us clean, that drives the trust, that drives it makes a bunch of sense on many, many levels. So at the field level, worldwide, you won't see that from us anymore, and it's up to our customers to kind of meet us halfway on this journey and recognize this is the way that the cloud works versus the way that we used to buy traditional software. Theme number 2, I call it FUD Wars. It's the, when I talk about FUD, the things that come in my mind in this space is, well, Jim, I want to be in multi-cloud. Okay, why? And I have nothing against multi-cloud. I see some big organizations that are successful at. Why? Because, stool, vendor lock-in. That's the classic one. Oh, vendor lock-in. That's going to, I want to be able to move quickly between 2 different clouds. Okay. Let me share. I have seen customers in the last 12 months move between those big hyperscale cloud providers in weeks, not years. And so a lot of the FUD that gets thrown around about vendor lock-in is just that, it's FUD. And if you're thinking about multi-cloud, just challenge your teams, ask why, what's the value. There's nothing wrong with multi-cloud, but if you're a smaller organization or you're early in the game in terms of your cloud journey, now you're mixing in 2 different sets of skills and learnings and vendors and complexity that could actually just slow you down and inhibit what you want to do. The other one that we see a lot of is, hey, Microsoft, you've got a really cool whatever service, but I'm going to roll my own version of this. And again, unless you're an ISV type guy, 99% of the time this is a bad idea. So let's take some examples. In the big data space, we've had Hadoop and Spark for a long time. You can fire up the infrastructure, spend days, typically weeks, and you can build out your infrastructure to do some big data work. Or, alternatively, you can come up to us and you can switch on sites, data insights, HDI and some others, and have a service that's on in under an hour. You've got those clusters to go play with. The same thing in the container space, by the way. You see that Kubernetes is kind of taking the world by storm. A lot of folks want to take their software development projects into a container space. Sure, you can fire up and build a Kubernetes infrastructure. And as a science project, it's really cool. And you might have some developers and people and engineers in your organization that will happily spend their time doing that. But it really doesn't add anything to what your business is trying to do, which is to get your software running in a container, not all the other infrastructure underneath. So why not use AKS, which is a service that Microsoft offers that runs all that Kubernetes infrastructure behind the scenes for you, and is very cost effective to boot. Let me share this graph, and full credit to Forrest Brazil at the bottom here. You'll see his name. Awesome guy. He blogs quite a lot. He's actually he's an AWS friend, so don't diss him for that. But he has some really good things, and I love this graph. And some of my CSAs walk around with this graph on their phone, and every time customers are about to make foolish decisions, they pull this graph out and say, okay, where are you on the cleverness wisdom graph? And here's the graph. So you got wisdom hanging up there, and then cleverness going left to right. And the idea here is, and most of us now, although even as recently as 5 years ago, I would have had people argue this, but most people are over the fact that trying to treat your data center as cloud is clever. Okay, most people are past that. But we still see a lot of this on the right-hand side, which is, hey, I'm going to write my own version of that. I'm really good at that. I worked with one of the big 5 banks, and this was almost 5 years ago, and they decided that they basically wanted to build, they were going to be multi-cloud for a start, which kind of gets them into this journey in the first place. They said, well, we're going to build a control plane, and we're going to abstract all the cool tools. It's like giving someone a socket set, but taking all the handles off the sockets and saying, and everyone's going to come through here, and we'll do the same for you, and the same for Amazon, and the same for anybody else, and that way we can be multi-cloud and move around. It was a big science project. It cost them $10 million, 18 months, and at the end of it, not a single thing was working in our cloud or any other major cloud. And those individuals actually left that company and got put out to pasture. So think carefully before you jump in these journeys, or you watch your teams jump in here. And Forrest shares this next one, which is, if you're thinking and you really still like the idea, I really want to do that science project. This is a typical journey, and most of us know this makes sense when we stop and think about it, but in the moment, in the heat of the fun of doing something interesting, we forget. And to start with, it's very cool because it doesn't cost me anything, and I got this science project, and it's cool. And I didn't need to get your version at Microsoft or Google or anybody else. And you spend more time, and you end up more time and more R&D, and you build this, and then you discover there's a bunch more features. And of course, you're an organization with hundreds of thousands of people, but these vendors, the Googles, the Microsofts, the AWS of the world, get the benefit. We get the side benefit of hundreds of millions of individuals around the planet trying to do this stuff. So guess what? All that knowledge goes back into the development of our services that you decided you didn't need because you're going to outfox these people for whatever reason you chose. And so you end up and you do your homegrown solution, and oops, you have an outage. Boom. Things get really expensive and nasty all of a sudden. I'm not saying that there might not be things that are really specific and unique and they define what your organization does. If that's the case, go for it. Do it. It's the thing that's going to make a difference. It's going to take your company, your organization into the digital age. But challenge that thinking. Ask those questions. Think about what you're doing before you embark on these kinds of journeys. A couple of do's and don'ts here. We'll keep on moving. I won't drain all these. But again, I highly encourage you, try it. Fast failing is a term that Agile folks throw out there, but it's not a bad idea. Have a go. Try that service that does. And then the last point here, remember, there's a lot of, I think you'll bring it out later, there's a lot of other as-a-service things like Azure brings. So you can run DR as a service, backup as a service, identity as a service. There's a ton of other stuff that you can do that helps, which leads me neatly into my next theme, which is innovation. Don't mistake lift and shift for innovation. We see a lot of folks doing this all the time. It's got a lot better, but 5 years ago I used to joke the lift and shift, really we should drop the F out of shift. And the reason was because it was so underwhelming and caused so many problems. And this story I'm going to share now involves a local customer based in the Vancouver market. Again, I won't share names. Cool customer, and they have an end consumer type service that they run, highly seasonal. And they spoke with us. I think it was in the September timeframe. So, and this is a good 5-6 years ago now. Long story short, they were in a rush, and it wasn't so much about multi-cloud, but they knew by April they wanted to be out of their data center and they wanted to be in Microsoft Azure. And so they decided infrastructure was the way. They weren't going to re-architect anything. We're going to go full bore, we're going to move this stuff, and we're just going to end up inside Azure. And, you know, in hindsight, maybe we could have pushed them harder on some of these things. And interestingly enough, a few months later, I worked with a different customer in the insurance industry, niche product that they do, and had a very different journey for a very similar .NET SQL type architected application they wanted to move. These guys moved their application into Azure. Back then, 5 years ago, Azure was a lot more cranky in terms of looking at IaaS host health. So it would look at your guest VM and go, ooh, you don't look like you blinked recently, I'm going to restart you. That's improved massively, and we've got the stats and the numbers to prove that. But engineering back then, you know, running VMs in Azure was definitely more finicky and would pick on it. These guys thought they knew how to run SQL Server really well, and they had a high available SQL Server with HA groups inside Azure. When they first got their reset, they discovered that their DBAs just didn't have the skill set. They really hadn't practiced DR, ever. And they found out that they were getting these pseudo-public outages. So it was a tough journey. They got past that, and they've gone on to be successful. And eventually, they moved off to SQL as a service, database as a service, which is where I think we should have taken them in the first place, and I would have loved to get to, but their reticence was, oh, we've got to go fast, and it's going to be quicker and easier if I do it in IaaS. We had a very similar thing, and an insurance customer I was working with in the same 12-month period. They decided they were going to tweak, re-architect a little bit of their SQL backend, loved it. Much, much, much more successful. They basically IaaS their whole data stack. And were very happy because then they were spending their software dev time on the features that differentiated their particular niche insurance service that they were offering. So, don't be tempted to hit the easy button. A couple of do's and don'ts, and again, you'll get these in the handouts. And then remember, even if you're doing infrastructure as a service, there are definitely things that you can do to modernize that. We talked about database as a service, and I mentioned some of these other things that you can run. Tons of security services, things you can switch on, that frankly you just can't do even in your homegrown stuff in your own data center. How are we doing for time? I'm going to keep moving. Theme 4, we see a lot of hoping that your individuals are going to cloudify themselves all by themselves without any effort on behalf of the organization and its leaders. This one I'll actually mention is public. The Quebec government has made a decree that in March 2023, they mandated that all their biggest departments are going to be out of their data centers and are running in a public hyperscale cloud, and they've approved 2 vendors, AWS and Microsoft Azure, to do that. What's curious about what the government has done is the things that, you know, when you make those kinds of decisions, it's the accidental behavior that you create that sometimes gets you into trouble. So, move me by March 23, which I think is a lot of time, but hey, and don't break anything. And that's kind of the kicker here. And so what we're witnessing and watching now is a lot of behavior with the IT groups that support that province where they are making their migrations very tentatively. I mean, I think it's early stages and they'll come through this, but we see that drives the kind of behavior where I just want everything to run as it is in the cloud. So again, it kind of takes everyone back to just repeating and rinsing the stuff you had before. And if you take something as it is now and move it over there, is it any better? Maybe, might save you some dollars here and there, but really you're missing out on so much value. And so you need to make time and space. Let me compare and contrast that to what our CFO, Amy Hood, did when she wanted to force Microsoft to get some of our folks out of buying hardware, out of our own data centers. She turned around, this is, I think about 3 years ago, said, okay, and by the way, one of our worst groups for hardware purchases, Xbox, that whole gaming industry, you know, they just go and buy another honking server, stick it on their desk. We got, you know, shadow data centers all around that gaming team's environment. She said, no one buys server hardware unless I, the CFO of a 150,000 person, sign it. It was subtle, but it's very different in terms of the mechanics and the outcome that she drove. And now you see heavily Xbox, one of our best internal customers, and they run large swaths of their gaming stuff all inside Azure, no problems at all. So again, same intended outcome, slightly different way of getting about it, and very different sort of success in the early days around what you get and the unintended consequences of that kind of decision. If you read, anyone here read Project Unicorn or Project Phoenix, the Gene Kim books? Okay, a few people. Really good books, because again, they don't give away customer names, but they're real stories that we've all seen and bumped into in the industry. Project Unicorn talks a lot about giving your organizations time and space and safety to learn and do new things. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of, if you're a leader in your organization, finding a way to give space so that people can try new things and be innovative. That's how you get to innovation. And if you're, going to keep doing business the way you've done it forever, and you're going to have zero tolerance towards any kind of outages, you're very quickly going to crunch and kill your innovation, and you're not going to get there. So you've got to find some ways to put guardrails out there that are safe, let people do innovation, and quickly iterate on that and learn new things and drive you forward. Last one, because we're right up against the time here, and then we'll switch across to Pablo. Theme number 5. Thinking that the network perimeter is the way to secure your particular set of toys. This is not unique to cloud, and I would really hope that none of you sitting on your own data centers and stuff running in on-premises think that a network rule is the kingdom to securing your assets. It's not. We work with a sizable insurance customer. We got a number of them out in the GTA area. This particular customer was doing some big data work, collecting lots of data, and they were interested. This is way back now, sort of pre-Spark days, but they were looking at Apache Hadoop, and they accidentally left one of their ports open, and as a result, some of their data leaked and got out. A couple of learnings from here. First off, they weren't using any of the frameworks that we provided. They weren't using the policies that we have out there. They were really good. I mean, you don't have to get policies right first time, but we have baked ISO 27001 and protected B-candidate policies that you can take and apply and enforce and see what your subscriptions are doing in Azure. And that's a great place to start and know you're in a pretty good place in terms of securing your assets. You can't do that on premises. It's much harder to. And the other thing, they didn't do any data classification. It turns out a lot of this data was actually dud data, so it wasn't a big deal. And it was mock data for testing. But because they hadn't done their diligence on classifying the data, when the CEO got wind of this, boom, everything stopped. And so that was their innovation killed in a heartbeat. And really, they didn't even progress and take some good lessons of security from this. And it's been a few years for them to get their feet back in the water and start moving in with these projects. But again, compared to their competitors who we see in the industry and are way, way ahead, it's a shame because that's really put them on the back foot. So I put a couple of do's and don'ts in here. I've shared one story with you. At this point, I want to transition to Pablo. And then I know we've got a bit of a panel time, so we do Q&A. And again, encourage you folks. That breakfast looks good from here. The coffee's good. If you want some, please help yourselves. So again, my name is Jim Bowyer. I get to serve our customer success organization at Azure. I wish you all a huge amount of success as you digitally transform your customers. Of course, I'm biased. I hope you're going to do that in Microsoft Azure. But I think there's some good lessons that we can take and share with all of our community and friends. And even if you're adopting different color clouds, a lot of these things will, if you can address these, it'll help you be successful in your own projects. Pablo, over to you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the stage, as Jim said, Pablo Garcia.
people nodding. So I don't have a lot of slides. I'm here just to talk to you about my experiences, our experiences of fitting. I have some do's and don'ts that mostly are from fitting, so I'll try to keep them relatively generic. My background, my first job was at .com that actually does not exist anymore, obviously. I've been in the Microsoft space all my life. I used to work for a partner like Optimus back in New Zealand. I worked there for 14 years. And now I'm at Fitting. So I've been a partner, I'm now in-house, so I've seen it all. Fitting Digital started 5 years ago, roughly, because if we were not trying to do innovation from the inside, someone's going to force that on us. So that's how Fitting Digital started. We started on more on the public website, e-commerce space, but very quickly we realized that we're building applications that did the same, that were not talking to each other. People were starting things from scratch over and over and over. People were doing authentication, security, data integration 2, 3, 4 times for different applications. So that's how we came up with the idea of what we call my.finning.com, which is Finning's online cloud IoT platform. And actually, I do have some. That will run in the background. This is a little bit of a marketing video to give you an idea of what my.finning.com is. So I run the teams that build and support this platform. Again, before we actually put this in place, multiple authentication methods on applications that didn't talk to each other. You couldn't even do order tracking online. We launched order tracking maybe like 6 months ago, roughly. So people actually had to go to the branch or pick up the phone before we implemented order tracking on my.finning.com. So the teams are like 100 and 150 people that work on this. We work with a few partners, and we work very closely with Microsoft as well. So I'm here to talk to you about 5 do's and don'ts. You're probably going to remember like 3 of them, and then if you can think about implementing one of those or taking one of those to your team, I think we're good. So the first one, we started from nothing. So back in July 2017, when I joined Finning, there was literally no subscription, no Azure DevOps, no developers, nothing. Actually, Anthony's here. I'm not sure where Anthony is. There you go, Anthony. It was Anthony as an architect, and I have a developer part-time. And I think my.finning.com was like a black website with some yellow squares. So we had a good opportunity to start greenfield. So when you start from scratch, you can do anything. And as technology people, we tend to overcomplicate things. So that's my first don't overcomplicate things. One of the first things we had to tackle was authentication. And it sounds simple, but it's a little more complicated. I'm sure that many of you know that. Especially when talking to the business was saying things like, oh, we need to allow people to register themselves and you SSO and do federation and log in with Facebook and Gmail and everything. It's like this is madness. So we went with AAD, with Azure Active Directory, which it was a limitation. No, only people within Finning, with Azure Active Directory could authenticate, and also only people that are federating with us could come into our platform. But it was a limitation. We only tackled that maybe 12 to 18 months later. But actually, we were done. We're done authentication, move on, and we can focus on some other more important things like getting our data into the platform. So that's my first don't overcomplicate things. Number 2, we are not experts, right? So we are in the heavy machinery industry. We are experts in the mining space. But Finland is not a software development firm, so we rely in partners like Optimus. So my first do is engage with local partners. That's one of the strengths of the Microsoft network. Talking to partners, there's people that have been doing this forever. So we engage with a local partner to help us implement our integration with Azure Active Directory. Again, because we needed the results quick, integrate it with Azure Directory, and then we could move on into other more interesting things. Number 3. Number 3, invest in automation. Way when we started, we put a lot of effort into test automation, which is probably the first thing that comes to your mind when I say automation. But with cloud, you also have ARM templates. You can use Azure CLI, infrastructure as code. Invest in deploying your infrastructure automatically because it pays off. Today, we're trying to roll out new environments, and because we implemented heavily in automation 2-3 years ago, now we can focus on how do we take it to the next step. How do we add more consistency? How do we get the environment to perform better, to be more secure, etc. But we have a foundation of automation that allows us to do that. How many of you are using Terraform here? Terraform, anyone? 1, 2. Terraform just released, upgraded the connectors to Azure, which is actually amazing because we started investing in Terraform like 3 months ago or so. And again, we wouldn't have been able to go there if we hadn't had all that automation in place. And again, automation, again, is one of my passions, super important. People will come to you and say, no, we don't have to do it. Like, just do it manually. Like create something in production, like deploy it. We need it now. Those were the battles that we had to fight like 3 years ago. Now people understand it. Not just technical people, but project managers, the BAs, the business. Everyone understands what the value that automation brings, and then they become advocates for you because they see it deploying code reliably into production, deploying solutions reliably into production is super important. Number 4, I touched a little bit on deployments. Another space where we spend a lot of time up front was on our pipelines. How many here use Azure DevOps? Again, only a couple of people. I love Azure DevOps, and it's one of my favorite products from Microsoft. I feel that there's many people that still have that old school view of what Team Foundation Server or Visual Studio Team Services used to be. My number 4 do is give Azure DevOps another chance. It's an amazing platform. Microsoft is investing a lot of money into it. There's new features, new plugins coming out every day, and that's how we deploy all of our code. We have invested heavily in CI and CD. We have a whole bunch of YAML pipelines that deploy all of our infrastructure, deploy all of our code constantly into our Kubernetes cluster in production through dev QA stage in production. And again, for us to be able to say, yeah, the 5 or 6 development teams are going to be deploying code on Monday reliably, and all the product managers get their features like with no issues, that's really important. The last one, I have one more do or don't for you, which I enjoyed your presentation. Where's Jim? Jim? Over there. I love Jim's presentation because we prepare separately and then we came together and compare notes. There's so much overlap, so many interesting things that we both saw in terms of do's and don'ts in the cloud. One of my favorite ones is multi-cloud or portability of your code. I was at another event a few weeks ago and talking about multi-cloud. Someone was talking about multi-cloud, and they said, what's the right way to do multi-cloud? You code everything twice. you do it one cloud native and down one cloud agnostic. And I was like, crazy. If you have the money to do that, like I have, you know, my business, like go, deploy to production, quick, reliable, we need to see features. And if I had to go and say, hey, actually we need double the budget to be able to be cloud agnostic, they would think I'm crazy. So, like Jim was saying, people fall into the portability and multi-cloud trap very easily. There are good reasons to do it, but it doesn't have to be the default one. It doesn't have to be from the get-go. I think with Azure, there's so many features that you can leverage. They will fast-track your deployments. It will get you like maybe 70% there, 80% there. Give it a try, and then you can build on top. You can build it yourself. You can build it with a partner, or you can give feedback to Microsoft. We tried Azure Container Services maybe 2 years ago or so. The product was not quite there. We waited, gave feedback to Microsoft. Now we're using AKS and love it. It's an amazing product. So yeah, last one. Don't fall into the portability trap. If you have policies that ask you to do that, plan accordingly, because it's not just about moving it, but it's also the cost of maintaining it and running it, and having a team that understands all these different clouds you're embarking on. So I talked to you about 5 different do's and don'ts. The first one was don't overcomplicate. Second one was leverage your partners. The partner network is very strong here in Vancouver. Number 3, automation. Invest in automation upfront. It's really important. Number 4, Azure DevOps. Give Azure DevOps a chance. It's a great product. And number 5, multi-cloud. Don't go there first. Like Jim was saying, why? Why are you doing it? What's the real reason why you're doing multi-cloud? If you have to do it, plan accordingly, because that's the only way you are going to succeed. And those are my do's and don'ts for Azure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pablo. Pablo Garcia, everybody. Our final section today is a panel discussion with Jim and Pablo and the CTO at Build Direct Technologies, Mukund Mohan. If you were here last time, Mukund was kind enough to moderate the panel discussion for us, and he's back again. So thank you so much for doing this. Following that, we will open up the floor for questions from you and answers from the panel. Take it away, Mukund.
Thank you so much. Okay, before I get Jim and Pablo, feel free to come in and sit down. I wanted to get a quick sense of the folks that are here. So I've got a few questions so that you can get context on where they are in the journey, what are the biggest issues, if you will. So quick show of hands as I go through some of the questions so we can make it more relevant to where you guys are. How many of you right now are in more than one cloud, or multi-cloud as they call it? So there's a couple of people. Don't be shy, it's okay. Okay, how many of you are on-premises and on the cloud? So more people. And how many of you are only on the cloud? So that's your mix. I think more people are on-prem and on cloud than on one cloud and then on multi-cloud. Okay, that was the first question. If I had to put together 3 challenges that you are facing in your journey to the cloud, raise your hand if you think that is your number 1, number 2, and number 3. I'll go through all 3 of them, but I understand that you might think the third one might be your first one, so I'll go through all 3 of them again. Okay? So first one, DevOps and Agile at scale. Second one is optimization of cloud cost. And third one is innovation, new product development on the cloud. So among these 3, DevOps, Agile at scale, cost optimization on the cloud, and then innovation. Which of these 3, number 1, let's go with DevOps at scale. How many of you think this is your number 1 challenge? I can't see that, right? But okay, thank you. Optimization of cloud cost. None of them, good. Innovation and new product development. before I go to the next one, I'm going to ask, what am I missing that is not in those three that maybe is on your list? Want to throw it out to me before I go to the panel? Yes?
Identity management.
Identity management? Okay. Identity. Anything else that's on top of your list? Anything else that is on top of your list? Identity management? Yeah, go ahead. Security and compliance? Okay. Anybody have anything else outside of these three? Okay, terrific. So, so you guys get a good sense of the audience as well. We got a good sense of the do's and don'ts on the cloud. I have a couple of questions for you based on just listening to more parts of it. I was at Amazon, I was at Microsoft, so I've been in the trenches, if you will, on the Azure side as well. When I moved over from inside Microsoft and Amazon to now being a customer, one of the biggest challenges for us was we were much more efficient on premises than we went to the cloud. Help us understand, and you saw a lot of people are in that journey, not because we are anything else, it's because we've been working on it for so long that we've optimized the cost. Talk to me, Jim, first about, you've seen customers who've gone through this, and how have they made that transition, number one? And then Paulo, did you even have this as an issue, or are you just cloud native from the beginning? Why did you structure?
Yeah, your observations are not, unfamiliar. I think everyone sees the same thing, and part of it is you've got decades. Most people, regardless, even if you're a younger company, you're hiring, your hire base has got muscle memory that's predicated on doing stuff on premises. That's going to change as we evolve and grow as a market and an industry. But you've got a lot of built-up, pent-up history of people doing things a certain way and trying to always live within those approaches. And hey, for decades, that's been the safe part. And a lot of IT shops and enterprises have, as much as they've been IT, they've really been protectors of a company's, an organization's wherewithal, and stopping people from doing dumb things with their SAP ERP or any other sort of stuff that they implement. Stopping bad stuff happening has been a large part of their mental acumen. So, a couple of things in there. And when you polled the audience just now, 1, 2, and 3, I see 1 as the keys to opening up 3. Very hard to do innovation if you can't do some of the agile DevOps stuff. And to get there, you've got to think about how you open up that space for learning and growth in your own teams. Pablo?
Yeah, so one of the principles we have is if you build it, you run it, right? I think organizations can fall into the trap of thinking cloud consumption, cloud optimization, that's IT's problem, that's our problem. If we provide the right visibility to both sides, the development teams, the technical teams, and the business on where the Azure consumption is today, where's it going? Often solutions are designed and no one thinks, oh, how is this going to impact the consumption? Like, do that up front. It's a hard job, but no, it can be done. And then, visibility, and it's never ending. It's like, look at what resources you're using, optimize. Can you go into reserve instances? Work with Microsoft. It is a different mindset because again, coming from the development space, developers want to just code and push. Let's code, push, and keep iterating, keep looking after your resources. And visibility. Just show, hey, this is where we're spending Azure, these kind of resources, and talk to Microsoft. How can we optimize this? That's the way to go.
A couple of people, actually, a lot more than a few people, raise their hands in terms of innovation. The thing that is interesting about innovation when you're trying to do new app development is not 100% of it is easy to know up front what you're going to go down the path for. Right? You got to do a lot of experimentation. Some of it will fail. One of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with as customers is while we're going through that experimentation phase and knowing that some of it may not work out, if you will, trying to get buy-in from other teams, especially from the business teams. 80% of the stuff may not work, but we will learn a lot along the way, which is a euphemism in some people's minds for you're just going to try it and not do anything with it. talk to me, Pablo, and then Jim, both ways. How did you convince Finning to go down the path of my Finning versus them saying, you know what, I'm happy with people calling in and doing it. It isn't broken. Why are you trying to fix something that's not broken?
I think we were lucky because the inception of my.thing.com was from the board, from the leaders, so we had the support from the get-go. But we've been doing this for 3 years, and it has the ups and downs. And so when you're right, when you deploy something new feature and there's no adoption, it's like questions like what do we do, what do we do, what do we do at the same time, where you deploy something and it's successful, like make sure you celebrate those successes and have clear KPIs, right? Like I used the example of order tracking before, which again, it sounds simple, but we designed a feature with some clear KPIs of what the savings were going to be, and then we can track them. You can say, hey, this is how we're saving some money to the company.
Tell me more about what are other companies doing in terms of being able to justify spending money on innovation, knowing that a lot of it may not work or some of it may not work.
Yeah, let me call out 2 strategies that I think can help unblock, and I've seen unblock customers who are hitting what I would call the innovation wall. First one, and actually a poll of the audience. How many folks in this room sponsor hackathons within your own teams? Okay, few. I would encourage the rest of you to think about that as a great way to germinate and grow and get buy-in to that journey, because people, it's real. There's a ton of learning in it. People are learning in a safe space. And when you come out of that, you're going to have much better ideas around what does this really look like? How much is that going to cost me? What problems did we hit that we weren't expecting to hit? The second one is incubation. Not always relevant, so we've got to think about the culture of your organization. One of our 2 great airlines, both of them are doing some cool stuff in Azure, but one of them decided that they were going to take out an entire group and build a new division, and they were just going to let it run on cloud. And they were so caught up in traditional IT, it was almost impossible for them to break out of it. That turned out to be the best thing they ever did. That team built what effectively was a new airline, all in Azure. And then they came back and evangelized that, and those people came back to their jobs in the main company, and that learning was allowed to carry on. So they built something of value for that company, but they were given the freedom and the space to go do that.
And if you think about it, that's how Finning Digital came about. We couldn't have moved this quick if we had all the boundaries of PMO processes and IT governance and et cetera, et cetera. So we started on the edge. We were allowed to innovate and to show our value, and then now we're inside again, and they can deliver and show value early on.
Just riffing off that, I think one of my slides talks about COE in a castle. These centers of excellence live in a sacred place. That's highly poisonous. When I talk about incubation, the people that are making the decisions, they got to be part of the journey. Terrible if you have an architecture team that lives in these sacred places and just says, hey Pablo, your team's got to live by this rule and this rule and this rule. And Pablo's team will go, well, I'm trying to implement something here and that doesn't make any sense. And why do we have these rules? And the individuals that are giving those rules don't actually own the outcomes. They're not responsible for the delivery of that. That's highly poisonous. So you want to get away from that if possible.
And I think when you show the value, then something that we are doing is helping the rest of the organization realize the value of cloud, the value of automation and things like that. We are contributing to our cloud governance at the moment, where all of other parts of the organization are not there, but hey, we lead by example and we show you how it can be successful.
I'm going to go to the security question that came up. As opposed to what you had mentioned in your presentation, Jim, perimeter security alone, which is firewall-based and maybe passwords and authentication. Talk to us a little bit about maybe tying in with identity as well. The solutions such as zero trust authentication, data access parameterization. So when you go into the data, you take the credit card, for example, as you store it, you split it into 4, parameterize each of these components. When you look at security applied and deployed across the organizations now compared to previously when you had a VPN-based, everything is inside or outside. What are the ways and mechanisms that you've seen people prioritize zero trust or parameterization or any of the other data security related elements, one versus the other? Which of them have been prioritized higher versus lower in your customers?
It's a healthy mix. I don't think there's one, but the key thing is the learning we described, which is do not just, there are things you can do in cloud that you just couldn't possibly do on premises. The ability to know that Jim logged on here and now he's logged on in Hong Kong 2 minutes from now, very hard to do. Not impossible, but hard to do with just our old on-premises stuff. The ability to tap into the telemetry that software vendors like Microsoft have around what's the malware that's happening in the environment, what threat attacks are happening. Our ATP solution now is being offered as a service, and it looks at things that you offer up and share in the telemetry from your systems, and lets you correlate that event and that event and that event equals step 4, you're going to be breached, and can look ahead. And so there's some clever things like that were hard, if not impossible, for us to do in a classic on-premises domain, and don't make any sense when we're trying to open up our services and allow remote workers and people to interact with our services all around the world.
Mike, do you want to walk around and make sure that people have a mic if they want to be able to? Oh, great, thank you. So we're going to be able to open it up for questions as well. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Cheslin is going to come over and have the mic for you. And if you don't have questions, I'm just going to start singing. So you're better off asking a question. Or if you want me to serenade you, that's fine as well. I've been told that I've got a good voice by myself, but it's a different question for another day. So Jim, this is a point that I wanted to bring up to you, and Pablo, I want to get your take because it's a very different point of view on my movement journey as we did. I was talking to Jason just at breakfast about this. We were completely on-prem, and then about 8 years ago did a lift and shift, saved about 30% right off the top. Not good, bad, or otherwise, we just saved 30%. Good, everybody was like, okay, that's enough. And then we came in and we started doing cloud native, and we were multi-cloud. We were hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. So we did about 60% on one, 40% on the other, for any number of reasons. And now we've gone completely to single cloud. That's been our journey, meaning from on-prem, and even now we're about 30% on-prem, which we want to get rid of, but it seems almost impossible to do for any host of reasons as well. But now we're completely on one cloud. When you look at that journey over the last 8 years or so, where are most of your customers right now, either on that path, or it seems to me from what the audience is saying, most of them are on the cloud. There's some on-premises, from what I've seen. They have on-prem and on the cloud. But what workloads remain on-prem in most of your customers that makes them want to say, I don't want to move this, or maybe I can't move it, or whatever the case might be. In your case, you're completely on the cloud, I imagine, right?
Yeah, one of the privileges I have is obviously I get to see lots of Canadian customers across all industries, government, commercial, and so I get an anecdotal sense of that. And I think the markets, 2020, no one's arguing about whether cloud's a proposition or not. If I go back even as recently as 2014, maybe 2015, we had lots of naysayers who were still saying, oh, it's not proven yet, I don't think I'm going to trust you guys, and it's not safe, and again, the FUD stuff that no one sat down and asked the hard questions, or, coming out of FUD, my accountant doesn't let me do that. That's CapEx, OpEx, the security, the government legislation, and you really have to get some leaders to stand up and ask the hard questions and say, why? Is that true? And then once you get under that, a lot of the times you find out that there isn't actually anything stopping you do that. In terms of stuff that gets left behind on premises and left behind, I mean, people are still investing. We sell a product called Azure Stack. People could buy appliances and run pieces of Azure inside their own data center facilities, and things like AKS will move across and become sort of first-party service that you can run equally well on your own appliances. There's always going to be a mix. If you're a bank and you're running ATMs, there's some edge compute. Edge compute is going to exist in all kinds of industries. It's probably going to exist where you need it, right at the edge, where the workers and your clients are being serviced. If you're a big telco, or there's going to be stuff that you run that's not going to be put inside a cloud. But I think for the vast majority of us, the question you need to get to, and this came to me over the years, just bouncing around different customers, is what is it that's unique and differentiates what I do? If you think about Finning, they got a very unique proposition. The stuff they do, the whole own resellers of the Catapult equipment and others, that's what they do. And there are things in there that are very unique and different to them. That's where they want to be spending and investing their dollars in their software development innovation. They don't really want to come up with a new version of a hypervisor. It might be cute, there might be people on Pablo's team that want to go on those journeys, but the shareholders and the people that sit on boards of any company like Finning or even a public government organization, that's not what they're interested in.
Yeah, I think when we started, we set 3 principles that actually guide us on how we were designing the solution. One was cloud first, platform first, platform as a service first, and Microsoft first. So 2.5, 3 years later, we achieved that. The thing for us was, hey, we don't actually have a team that will be, let's say, patching machines or looking after networks or other infrastructure topics. So it was fairly easy for us to say, hey, like we want to be building, ingesting lots of data. That's our number 1 challenge. So focus on data and building solutions. So that's why we went cloud native. And we as digital, one of our reasons for being is to modernize the rest of the organization as well. So we often engage with our internal teams, maybe the security team, to show, hey, this is something we're doing. We have containers, and we want to run vulnerability scans on those containers. And here's some tools. Like it will be easy for us, and we will help you, security team, to ensure that we're protected from the outside. So I think if anyone works in a digital organization, it is your job to also be educating other parts of the business.
Questions? Any folks with questions so far yet? Oh, you really like to hear me sing. I love that. Did somebody raise their hand? Oh yeah, there you go. There's a gentleman right there.
One of the services that I haven't heard you speak about so much yet is around serverless, whether they be functions, logic apps, or the equivalent, and the move towards microservices. So one of the biggest challenges I've seen on the move towards microservices is around orchestration and being able to see, a transaction that might have been in one application is now distributed across 12 different little pieces of applications. Being able to stitch that together to be able to troubleshoot, operate, and potentially using app insights and things like that to help with that. What are you seeing is the latest state of the art there, and do you see serverless as a big part of the growth of Azure, or is that just a tool for trial, for prototyping?
So just let me summarize the question. 2 portions, big growth in serverless, and also the ability to manage across microservices. Both don't have to be dependent on each other. They're independent of each other anyway. But what are you doing to orchestrate, manage, and monitor as they appear and then as they do?
Yeah, in terms of serverless versus non-serverless, we challenge our developers and technical teams to come up with a design and find the right resource on the tool that is fit for purpose. It will be very easy to, I think developers would probably do everything functions or everything microservices or everything something else because it's the flavor of the month. So in terms of where do you go with that, have some principles in terms of your architecture and get the teams to work closely with their architects to make sure that they pick the right resources up front. In terms of orchestration, I think you touched on App Insights. You can do traceability through different platforms on App Insights, and you can use log analytics to query that and find where your bottlenecks are, performance issues are. Like what I was saying before, it will get you maybe 70–80% of the road if you are running like lots of transactions, lots of services. You need you need more power. There are products in the market that will for a price, will help you with those transactions across multiple platforms, multiple clouds.
It's, I mean, I'm not going to iterate what Fabulous did because it's all fantastic and I love that. Just to add into around functions, Lambda, whatever, serverless sort of products you're playing with, it's definitely at the more of the leading edge in terms of service capability. So to Pablo's point, test it, try it, ask the hard questions. There are some edges on that will stop you from doing some of what you want to do and doesn't make sense. We tend to see scripting type stuff that you would do in your operations work quite neatly in functions. And that's a good place to start for a lot of things that you want to do. Microservices, it's a growing adventure, and there are more and more maturing tools. Some of them are very high-end and expensive right now. I think you're going to see, it's up to your appetite. Do I want to spend that money investment up front, or do I want to wait a little bit and let some of that stuff mature and become more baked in the cost of some of these products, and I get the advantage of other people's investment for cheaper?
Let me give you our journey, right? Just I'll let you get to the question. We run roughly about 1,400 microservices, and we have about 700 or so serverless components that are event-driven, edge-driven, and event-driven as well. We're more on Lambda than we are on Azure Functions as well. We use a combination of SignalFx so SignalFx used to be a standalone company. I think now they're owned by Splunk. We've deployed it on Azure as a platform for us to be able to use. SignalFx is fairly good for us to be able to do orchestration services. And for non-orchestration services, a combination of Kubernetes at scale for each individual microservice. And what the biggest challenge, of course, is that there's a lot of code reuse that we thought that we would get that we're not getting at all. So what happens with microservices is every engineer or a set of teams think that they own the service end-to-end. They end up doing the same thing as maybe 5 other teams do. So the biggest challenge for us has been microservice API discovery, not so much orchestration. The orchestration, to a large extent, given that they're encapsulated and given that they are trigger-based, meaning I can call this other function, I can call this other service, that service is expected to respond in a certain way by API. The problem is they're probably rewriting the same set of things I've written. There's nothing to go away from that. It's more discovery of these services that has been a challenge. SignalFx works, and I think App Insights works very well.
So before we switch topics, can you comment on how you guys approach the DevOps Agile aspect of pushing your new functions?
Yeah, so I think for us from a DevOps and Agile, for us DevOps at scale is the biggest challenge. So we use a combination, initially we use Azure, Azure Resource Man. One of the things that I think Pablo mentioned, which I think most of us would relate to, is infrastructure as code. That is one of our biggest push that we have learned to be very effective to be able to scale DevOps. What that means is you get developers to be able to also specify infrastructure in a Ruby-like script or in a C#-like script. So instead of having to be able to manually, as he had mentioned in his presentation, go and instantiate specific infrastructure elements, you specify it as code, either Terraform. We use a lot of Terraform, but we also use Azure Resource Manager. And Azure Resource Manager for us works a little better, but you can immediately deploy it very quickly. And now, whenever I have 100 new people that we've hired in the last 4 months, we've hired 100 new devs in the last 4 months in India, the only way to scale that up is infrastructure as code. You cannot be able to tell every one of them, take these scripts, now run it individually on your own, see if you can tweak it, see if there's any changes, and then we'll see if it works. So for us, DevOps at scale, those 3 things work very effectively. You had a question, sir?
It's kind of related to what you were saying about microservices.
Can you hold it a little bit closer?
Yeah, sorry. Related questions. And I don't argue that infrastructure as a service is important and orchestration is important. But I think more important how we orchestrate application built on the top of this infrastructure. Much more business sense, I think, much more important. Infrastructure is not a problem these days, I don't think so. But a question to Jim. Really, I want to learn from the best, and as I used to do with MFC library, and all the code was open. So I learned from Microsoft for all my customer solutions. So in this case, I want to know how to Microsoft itself actually using those microservices for solutions like, for example, data fabric or data explorer or logic apps or common data service or Azure Active Directory, I'm sure that you don't use Kubernetes for that. You probably use Service Fabric or something like that. I never seen any article on that. So my question, how you build your own services? Because as an ISV, I want to extend Azure with my own solution similar to Microsoft Funds. Thank you.
So the question, I think, is how do you guys use some of Azure's 100+ services, specifically he's talking about Azure Active Directory and a few of those internally at Microsoft for either app development or for infrastructure management? I think he's more caring about apps than he is about infrastructure.
You know, I'll reflect a few things back. I run a separate talk called Inside the Blue Box. And in that talk, I talk about how do we build services on services. And one of the interesting things about Microsoft is you know, we have Office and Xbox and OneDrive and all these other, and Dynamics, and we run those and build those. And you're right, internally at Microsoft, there is a lot of folks, the SQL group are big into Service Fabric. That's where they've invested and put that on. That's been open source now, that's out there. I wish they'd open sourced it earlier, but that's, you know, the way that people evolve and think. If I'm sitting on the outside in trying to learn, I think good things to hang out with, tune into those Git repositories that are out there. They're public. You can see a lot of this stuff, and you can be more curious about what people are doing and leverage that, and you'll see the comments in the backtrack. More and more of that is happening in the public domain. The one thing I've learned about, you know, the transition for us as an industry is there's very few things that are really secret now. You know, the one sort of place that we don't talk about is, well, where are we going to open up a data center next? And the reason we don't do that is because, you know, obviously there's only so much real estate in the world, and you're competing against everybody else. But all the other stuff, we're moving so fast. It's not about being secret. It's very public. And the other thing I would do is hang out. I mean, I can point you at various YouTube recordings and a lot of our sessions where we openly talk about our own experiences using Service Fabric and using Kubernetes to develop our own products. So in the little time I have, that's kind of a taster, and certainly we could follow up offline, and maybe that's a future topic, the Inside the Blue Box, which is something I used to use as a vehicle to get folks, highly technical engineering folks, to feel more comfortable about using Azure. Once they realized, oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah, I could build that, but I don't really want to use that. I want to build up here. That's the same thing you do in the open source space. Once we're more open about that, people realize what's going on. And a lot of the reticence, if you go back 4 or 5 years, was the average IT Joe Jane. You know, their arms are crossed, and they know what's happening on their servers, and that's how they keep people safe. And they don't like the fact that someone else is running lower layers of that OSI stack. And once you open that up and let people explore it, and transparent about how people can secure, that comfort level goes up. So I've wandered off topic there, but we can come back, and certainly if we catch you afterwards, Alex, we can follow up for more on that.
Yeah, I think one of the good places you'll find, as he had mentioned, is Azure DevOps at Scale on YouTube. I think there are 3 video channels, one of them by a gentleman who I used to work with called Sam Lamonaco, and then a couple of other guys who you'll find very, very effective in being able to tell you how they've built hockey stick app, how they've built Azure AD utilization within Microsoft, and how they've even rolled out multiple genome-based apps.
Yeah. If you bingle for Mark Fossil, you'll see a bunch of stuff from him. He worked in the SQL group. They're one of the early adopters of Server Fabric. He now leads the Server Fabric team.
I'm an IT guy. I know how to find that information. Thank you. But my point is that Kubernetes perhaps is a little bit overrated, because we are working with in .NET environment, and as a developers, and we deploying it to Microsoft Cloud. So why do we need Kubernetes when we have Service Fabric, right? So it's a question of why do we need this?
I can tell you that. I don't think it's overrated.
When we could use pure Microsoft technology, which they use themselves.
I don't think it's overrated. I don't think you've used it maybe in an effective fashion that we have. We use Service Fabric and we use Kubernetes as well. There are specific instances where a virtual machine-based environment creates way too much overhead, and the amount of percentage utilization within that infrastructure is not going to be enough. So we end up doing that. Let's take this offline. I know that.
It's not about the ends.
Yeah, no, I think when you realize that most of what Kubernetes is used for is to get rid of the ability to actually do hard infrastructure-related things on VM, that's where we end up using it to a large extent, and we orchestrate it across every one of them. More questions? Yeah. Did you have a question? Okay. Other questions? No? Do we still have time? Mike, how are we doing on time? Okay.
Yeah, we have time for 2 more.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions just as a follow-up with most of you guys as well, right? When we look at, one of the things that is interesting, we don't mention it, but I'm very curious. We've moved a lot more to the cloud, but our cloud spend, we've been able to keep it fairly constant to move lower, which is very counterintuitive. As more stuff goes to the cloud, you assume the cloud bill goes up. What are some tips, if you will, that you guys have done to keep optimizing cloud spend so it doesn't go out of control? Why don't you start and then follow and then we can go.
Yeah, so a couple of things that we do. We use Overcast, which is a third-party tool to monitor cloud consumption, has alerts, it allows you to do budgeting, all of that. And then that feeds from the built-in Azure recommendations on what you should be doing about your Azure resources, whether they're being underutilized, you should reduce the size and all that. Again, through Azure, infrastructure as code is a little bit of a double-edged sword. We are allowing developers to create their own resources, and sometimes they will spin up something that is a little bit expensive. That's where those alerts are important. And we are in the process of implementing Terraform, which will allow us to manage some of that governance a little bit better. And empower the developers, like explain to them, hey, this is the resources, this is what you are doing, visibility on the cost. I think the more you shift left and you empower the developers to make the right decisions, that's the right way to go.
A couple of things. So at the end of our engagements with customers, best practice that we've sort of trying to push is add an extra milestone called optimization. You can do that in a number of ways, but a great way is to open up the cost center tooling that you have inside Azure. That came years back from cloud, and actually lets you monitor multiple different clouds, and it gives you pointers that says, hey, you could do this, and that will save you X. That may or may not be valid, so you've got to use some again, don't fire all your IT folks, and because you need some of that common sense that says, no, that thing needs to run at that time. That's why we do it that way. The other one is we're in a market that's highly competitive. Things change fast. New features get added, costs get cut all the time. This is not the software vendors of the 2000s who, a lot of us would sell a product and that was it. If you don't like it, go home. We've got some really good competition out there which drives and pushes that price down, and that's a great place to be. Believe you me, I watched DOJ, I sat there through all that pain. I do not want to go back there. I look at some of the younger social media companies and I see them doing the same kind of thing. So there's some good competition there. In Azure, if you're not using reserved instances, if you're doing infrastructure, go look at that. A lot of the biggest customers we have that have moved massive amounts of their data center, reserved instances has been a key to that. They know they're going to run that ERP suite or financial suite for 2-3 years. It's a really brain dead. There's nothing to ask. You switch on RI, you get the instant savings, and most of them take those savings straight off and they put them in the next project. So much the kind of pattern you're describing. And with the vendors, both us, Amazon, and others are getting more proactive about that. We recognize if we don't help you optimize and keep that price down, if we don't do it, our competitors will do it. Again, that comes back to having a good, healthy, competitive market.
Last question, talk about partners. I know that one of the things that is important is when do we use partners? When do you recommend we go with a partner? When do you recommend that we maybe roll out something and get a partner to help us to do specific areas? It's very different obviously than the 2000s. In the 2000s you just go, I don't want to do this, I want a partner to do it. Now obviously there's a lot more nuance to which specialties do you get partners to help you with. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Like everything else, the partner ecosystem for us has been a struggle because the partners that we would naturally hang around with and do things with in our previous lives aren't the ones that are necessarily great and good for cloud. Some of them have made some changes. Some you're really better off going with newer folks like Optimus and starting net new with where they have that mindset. And the things you're looking for, again, as you look through the assets you run in cloud, think about the things that are really key and important and imperative to your organization. You want to have some knowledge that supports that and carries it on. And if you bring partners in, that's great. Really think of them as a conduit to accelerate the knowledge growth of what your organization does. Then the other stuff, think about things that you want to outsourced to others. And you'll find that there's, cloud itself to a point is you're giving Microsoft or others a piece of that puzzle to run. I want it as a service. There might be some things a little higher than that that you also want to give a partner to run as a service. And then there's the stuff that's the magic ingredients that's unique to what you do. And you really do want to have people in your fiefdom that understand that, because that's your crown jewels. And you can't really ask a partner to do that on your behalf. As hard as they try, they're never going to think with the intent of someone who runs the business.
Definitely engage with Microsoft. If you can be clear around where you're going, what your roadmap is, what your challenges are, Microsoft will help you with that really early design, and then find a partner that can help you with different workloads and different parts of the solution.
All right. How are we doing, Mike?
Fantastic. Well, that's it. That's all we have.
If you have more questions, feel free to come by and ask Jim and Pablo. They're going to be here for the rest of the morning at least. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, panelists. And thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here at the Optimus Breakfast Series. Our next event will be coming this spring, so stay tuned for that. We will be sending out some videos, and follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That's what we're doing these days? Great. On behalf of Optimus, I want to thank my team for putting together this event today. Webav, Shobit, Gracia, Pankaj, Simone, the musician that we had this morning, was phenomenal. Please give them a round of applause. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to put an event on like this, and I'm grateful for the support. I also want to thank our speakers and our panelists, Jim, Pablo, and Makand. We do have a token of our thanks for you, so make sure that you see us before you go. We have this space until about 10 o'clock, so a stranger is a friend you just haven't met yet. So please go network, introduce yourselves, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Take care.